Hey, welcome to another edition of Influence Today, the podcast where we unpack what shapes us, moves us, drives us. Chet Tart and Terry Lyles, and we have a special guest today. Our guest today is Gary Chupek. Each week we take a bold look at the forces that influence us, behaviors, people, media, culture, it all influences us. And today I think we're going to talk about what influences the mind, how the mindset is there. And Gary's an expert on the mindset, how people start their day, how people continue to think. Welcome aboard, Gary. Glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This should be a lot of fun with you two characters.
I
Yeah,
bet.
it will
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Hey, getting started. How did you get started in there? Give me a little bit of background of what you noticed and why this is a passion for you.
Well, I grew up an athlete in Canada and I played some football. And I know it's not the same as America, but hockey was the big thing where I'm from. So I have a particular love for football and hockey. And I was always thinking about the mental side of things. I wasn't the biggest player, I wasn't the fastest player. I was a captain of our team, but I think the reason why I was the captain of our team was because I had this strong mentality. And so that carried me through the years, through lots of things. And then in 2017, I went through a burnout. I was a pastor, believe it or not, for 28 years, ordained pastor, and had a burnout in 2017 and was thinking about what should I do with my life. And when it's kind of like when you're involved in a world, you know the language so well and you're so familiar with it, sometimes it loses its umph. And for me, it kind of did. And so when I was trying to recover from a burnout, a friend introduced me to Trevor Moad, who was Russell Wilson's mental performance coach. And I started a relationship with him. We just kind of met through a blind date. That person had set us up, and a marriage made in heaven. And I just respect him so much. And he, in a way, in many ways, was a mentor to me. And so he said, if you were to help a professional athlete and walk them through what high performance looks like, what kind of a process would you take them through? And so I went home, and the next month I just worked on this process, and I submitted it to him, and he hired me on the spot. So I've been doing mental performance
Oh,
coaching for the last probably 5 or 6 years. But I put in about $1,000 of study into sports psych, and my particular flavor, I would say, is leadership, just because my primary mode of helping people was always coaching. It wasn't telling or sort of, telling people what to think or what to do with their life or anything like that. It was just more coaching. And so the coaching piece fit really well. And then uh, sort of diving into the mental performance world and sports psych was just home to me. It felt like I had just finally come home after 30 years. And so here we go. I'm in it for the wild ride, and I can't believe the things that I get to do. I mean, ministry is hard. Like Warren Buffett said, being a pastor or being a minister I think he said it's the third hardest job in America. And I believe that's really true. And so it feels like it's a lot easier for me to do what I'm doing now. So I'm having
Hmm.
a lot of fun doing it.
It's good.
that's awesome. Hey, you just mentioned something, coaching and telling. Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a friend who was a coach who was coaching internationally, and the person that he was coaching was a businessman in a foreign country, and he had given him some advice, and that advice just about got that person killed. And he learned a really hard lesson that sometimes telling people what to think or what to do is maybe one of the most dangerous things that you can do for someone. But asking them questions, because nobody knows their situation better than they do, asking questions actually speeds up the process of change. In other
Hmm.
words, and in fact, I got the information from a University of Chicago, a paper that was done, I think in Leadership Magazine one day, where they were saying, well, what actually increases the speed of change? Telling someone what to do or coaching them and asking them questions through it. And they found out that over the long haul, it was actually faster to ask questions and be more of in a coaching mode than a telling mode.
That's awesome. Terry, you do that also with athletes and race drivers and things like that. There must be similarities that you guys could talk about here
Correct.
from who is coachable, who's not coachable, what are limiting beliefs, and what are not limiting beliefs. I think those are two topics you guys could really cross-pollinate with.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the coaching side, to your point, Gary, is so pointed because, you can only coach people that are willing to receive coaching. It's kind of like parenting on steroids, which is really difficult. The difference is that there's this connection that with your own family. This is why surgeons don't operate on their own family members because they don't listen to you. My child will come home and say, "Oh my God, Bobby told me something today that's amazing." I'm like, "Bro, I tell you that every day."
Yeah.
So coaching sometimes can be adverse. It's like it's the same information, but it has to assimilate into their belief system, which is what I think you're talking about on the mind side, that you have to let people find their mental structure and receive the information, which is coaching, versus telling them what they should do. And that could be a really tough transition in how they perform under pressure.
Yeah, it most certainly is. And for example, like what is the definition of mindset? Well, the general definition of mindset is a conditioned set of beliefs that drive behavior. I
Mhm.
think that's a definition, but it's not granular enough for someone like myself, who's a mental performance coach. And sometimes we have to dig deep with people. Like sometimes, yeah, as both of you can relate to this, sometimes you coach somebody for 6 months or even a year, and that person is still stuck and you say, man, we're just not quite hitting pay dirt yet. We haven't quite hit the treasure under the ground. We haven't dug far and deep enough to understand what this person is experiencing. And sometimes my greatest breakthroughs happen after a year. That doesn't mean that I'm a bad coach. It just means sometimes the performance needs to be unlocked, and sometimes it takes a little while.
No, it's so true. And Chet, you know this from doing coaching in the corporate world. He and I both do the same as you do in the corporate world in leadership and transformation leadership. And you can only take people as far as they're willing to go themselves. And in the racing world, which I train race car drivers and fighter pilots for the Air Force, it's all about your blind spots.
Mhm.
And fighter pilots have necks like this because they're constantly their heads on a swivel. Because they may not have someone who can see them. They can see air traffic control, they can see GPS, but they don't have someone watching their blind necessarily. So you have to constantly have your head on a swivel. And it's very interesting that athletes sometimes, as you know, when you're in the game, you can't see the game. That's why a lot of player coaches never work because you have to be outside of the game to see the court, see the ice, see the race. And it's very challenging. I think a lot of people think that, okay, I'm a CEO, I can do this, I know what to do, I have degrees, I have experience. But if they're not listening to their team, they're blind to their own blind spots, which can be very horrendous and cost effective in a negative way to their ROI.
Tell me
Yes.
about limiting beliefs, if you would, Gary. What do you think is the most common limiting belief as you meet business people, leaders, and athletes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I tend to think it revolves around identity. I know that's maybe a different way of looking at it, but you will perform how you think of yourself. In other words, I think that's what is very difficult for people that are maybe transitioning from one business to another or from one vocation to another, is they don't really see themselves in that future position. And so
Mm.
they don't know how to like chase after it. They don't know what behaviors are necessary in order to pursue that. And so because they can't see it in their mind's eye first, then they have a hard time living that out. And Trevor Moad used to always say, everything happens twice, first in your mind and then in real life. And
Mhm.
that's really true. If we struggle with something, it's because we can't see ourselves doing something in our mind's eye first.
Trevor Mollhead had some great comments about being in the moment, the present, being neutral. What does that mean, being neutral?
Well, the simplest way to explain that is that you're not necessarily overly positive and you're not necessarily overly negative. In fact, any negativity is not really helpful. To be a critical thinker is fine, but to be negative, well, actually, we know negativity works. It just works for the negative, right? It works for the worse. So we know negativity works. We're not really sure a lot about the outcomes of positive thinking. We think that it has short-term benefit, but we don't think that it has any long-term benefit. And that's why I'm a big fan of optimism. It's something that I teach regularly to my clients is that I would rather have you be an optimistic performer rather than a positive performer because the positivity is more of a feeling, but optimism always requires a factual reason for you to be optimistic about something. So when someone says that they're optimistic about something, I can ask why they're optimistic about it. And if they have valid factual reasons why they're optimistic about it, and we can affirm that. But if they're positive and they are constantly thinking positive about something, but they haven't given themselves a reason to be positive. And then it's more like a feeling that kind of comes and goes.
Yeah,
Man, you
my
talk
son
about the
play
power of
my
the mind. That's powerful.
yeah, it is. It is very powerful. My son plays tennis, and I say, look, there's no losing, there's learning. So
Hmm.
the score was that, but tell me one or two things you learned, and we'll apply that for the next winning. So because you can get caught up in all the losing, because we all lose a lot more than we win in any sport, in any business venture. If you're winning 10 or 15, 20% of the time, you're a rock star. But it's
Hmm.
the understanding, like you say, the mindset of accepting the loss, but learning how to shift that mindset to a positive set versus a negative.
Yeah, it's really about reframing failure in sports. And it's a lot like that in business, as you mentioned. Your ability to interpret the negative stimuli and reframe it or tell yourself a different story about that really shapes your future. Because if you can reframe it in a positive way that it lends toward a positive outcome, well, go do that, whatever that is. But your ability to reframe failure is actually what creates resilience in us. And resilience isn't necessarily an exercise we can do, or there's like, one or two. No, it's actually a myriad of different tools that we put together so that we become resilient people. And definitely reframing failure is a framework that I talk about often.
You say I'm a great athlete. We're talking about confidence. Also, it can turn into arrogant. And they say, hey, Chet, we want you to be coached by Gary. What is your process? What happens? Will you be able to walk me through this a little bit so I can understand what you do?
Yeah, so I teach something called identity-based performance. And the very first thing that we do, and if I was just sort of simplified in it in just a few steps, is that we just take a look at your personality and your identity. So if I was to cookie cutter something, let's say Terry does one particular thing very well, and Chet, you do something particularly well, but you wouldn't do each other's things to be successful. You would do your thing, right?
Hmm.
Whatever is comes naturally to you. And so this identity-based performance is finding ways to unlock athletes or high performers in business in ways that come natural to them. Now they might need to stretch a little bit, but they come natural to them. And we know that to be successful in business or in sports, you have to have a certain level of consistency. And the only way that you're going to be consistent is doing something that feels native to you or natural to you. So if we can unlock those reservoirs of performance in ways that are natural to you, it actually fuels your ability to be consistent in doing those things. And that consistency is crucial. So finding out who you are, how you're wired, like how you view life and what you think about things, that identity-based stuff is number one. Number two is we got to find out what you want. But if you don't know what you want, we're in trouble because you have to know what you want. And the reason why that is so important in business and sports is because it requires a certain amount of confidence for you to be successful at what you do. It's very difficult that you would find a successful, unconfident athlete. Most of them that
Right.
succeed are very, very confident. And so, what confidence does is it removes hesitation. So, while everyone else is figuring out what they want, the high performer already knows what they want and they're going after it. One of the examples I like to use is a fighter jet pilot. So if he's hesitant, even though he's thinking through the perfect strategy, but if he's hesitant, he's already dead.
Right.
So sometimes just making that decision and moving forward and course correcting along the way is the key. So number one, it's like, well, who are you? What's your identity? Number two is what do you want? Number three is why do you want it? And this is such a fascinating one because Pete Carroll told me one time, he goes, Gary, it starts with why, but it ends with who. And if you can attach why you want something to a who, it activates the emotional part of a person. So, for example, if you want to succeed for your spouse or you want to succeed for your parent, let's say, or a caregiver, or even your children, or someone else that you care about, that's really important is to figure out the who. I was working with a defensive lineman in the NFL, and he said, Gary, can you make me 2/10 of a second faster? And I said, well, let's talk about that. Like, why would you want that? And he goes, well, that would give me my second contract. And what would that do for you? Well, that would allow me to buy a house for my mom. And so he attached what he wanted to a who that made it very emotional for him. And whether we like it or not, we're very emotional beings. In fact, we're hyper emotional beings.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So being in touch with our emotions is really important. So your identity, what you want, why you want it, and finally, maybe the one that people don't want to talk about, but it's how badly do you want it? And if you're not willing to pay a price for what you want, then you're probably never going to do it. Thomas Sowell said, the great historian said, everything in life is a trade-off. And so, yes, if you want to achieve this, it's going to cost you something. And are you willing to pay that price? Being stuck is not being able to decide between two things. But listen, it's a trade-off. And if you're willing to do the trade-off, then great, go for it. But if you're not willing to do the trade-off and you're wanting to live a more balanced life, and know that that's okay, but you might not achieve, or don't be surprised when you don't achieve success at the highest levels.
I
Yeah,
get it.
I love that. I love that you're a person of faith. Chet and I both are as well. It's very important to both of us, our faith in God and family and friends and society and so forth. And I think that there's such a differentiation, I think, that's missed between, talent and skill. Talent's what God gives us. Skill is the discipline that brings it out. So
Mhm.
would you agree that you probably work on the skill set to bring that talent out more than because we all have something that we're good at. You dance, you sing, you're fast, you're tall, you're big, you're strong. You can work toward that, but that differentiation is, like you said, the mindset of why do I work this hard to sacrifice to put skill around the talent God gave me?
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. Like we were all gifted and equipped with a certain amount of talent in whatever area that it is,
Yeah.
but the discipline necessary to maximize those things, that's the challenge. And yeah, they're very different, and you can hone your skills of your mental performance. It just takes a certain amount of education and a certain amount of discipline and a certain amount of practice. And
Hmm.
when we talk about mental skills, I think sometimes these ideas kind of fly over our head in an ethereal kind of way. But you do really need to practice the mental skills. And the best place to practice those mental skills is in your family life or at school or at work or in your marriage or your significant relationship and even in your faith, and being disciplined in those ways and sort of allowing yourself to maximize what you already have, I think is powerful. I mean, the good book says that God wants us to both produce much and quality fruit. And so I think, well, like, yeah, we should live that way. We should live maximized to bring the most glory to God that we possibly can. And so to utilize mental performance stuff for our faith, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, that's good.
You talk about confidence. How do you deal with somebody who's arrogant?
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I like to use the example of those half balls, exercise balls. It's called a Bosu ball. So you
Yeah.
can stand on that Bosu ball. And one of the best things an athlete can do is stand on that ball and stabilize themselves. So the ball is unstable, but what you're doing is you're building your core muscles by standing on that. And then after a while, you acquire some more skill. Like say, for example, you start doing some squats on the exercise ball, and then you start doing squats with a kettlebell on the exercise ball, and you start doing all these crazy things on this exercise ball because it's unstable. And because it's unstable, it allows you to recruit muscles that you didn't think that you had to build your core. And I think in the same way, it's like that with mental performance stuff. If someone comes to us and they're arrogant, they're not unstable enough for us to work with. We need you to be coachable and sort of be unstable enough mentally and emotionally where you want to recruit muscles that you didn't think that you had. And so, dealing with an arrogant athlete is very difficult because they actually don't have a growth mindset. They actually have a fixed mindset. And Pete Carroll would say, listen, it's the athletes that don't think they need coaching are the ones who need it the most. Because the
Absolutely.
Hmm.
hungry players, they always want coaching. It doesn't matter. They're always looking for a competitive edge. And so it's kind of like note to self. Russell Wilson talked to Trevor Moawad 365 days a year. Russell's got a pretty solid mindset, and even he wants to stay sharp, but it takes 365 days a year to do that. So for an arrogant athlete, I meet them all the time, and they just don't think that that it's whatever I say or mental performance or sports psych isn't going to do much for them, when in reality it would do an absolute ton for them. And it would take them from, from their skill level from a 7 to a 9 or from a 9 to a 10. Like there's nothing that a player doesn't want when they want to be better. They just want to gobble it all up and they're hungry for it. So, yeah, it's hard to work with arrogant athletes. And sometimes you just need to let them fail a little bit and be present with them in the process. Because, as you mentioned earlier, it's really hard to coach someone who doesn't want to be coached. It's
Correct.
very,
Yeah,
very difficult
right.
and awkward. And we see this in business all the time, by the way, where you'll see a supervisor who wants to take their employees through a coaching process, but the employees didn't ask for it. The supervisor wants it, or the C-suite exec wants it for their employees, when in reality, their employees don't want it. And so it's just is very difficult to coach people who don't want to be coached.
Yeah, I think, and I love the fact that, arrogance and confidence, they're different, spectrums. Arrogance is the negative side of what you believe. Confidence is the positive side. So, you get this dexterity where you've dealt with performers, and I have, Chet has, whether it's corporate or sport, life, marriage, whatever the case might be. Arrogance is like, I'm going to beat you because I'm better than you. Confidence is, I'm going to beat you because I'm just good at who I am. I'm good with who I am. So it's that, and a lot of performers, young performers, don't realize that. They're flexing on people and they're trying to show, and I'm going to beat you down. It's like, listen, just the score doesn't lie. Just go win. I remember training, a NASCAR driver years ago, and he was a great driver, but he didn't win consistently on our team. And we'd constantly say, like, you got to win, you got to win, you got to win. So I'm the sport doc on the team, and ownership says, go work on him. So I went to him one day and I said, listen, man, you got to step it up. He goes, listen, I'm good. I'm like, you're not good. You don't get fired. You don't win. He's like, well, what do you mean I don't win? I'm like, look at your score. So, he finally, that's when the epiphany took place with him. It's kind of like a salvation experience where you realize that I'm not that. I need help. I need to
Yeah,
surrender and I need to be good.
yeah, yeah. I think there's only two real true ways to build confidence. There's a lot of things out there in, let's say, pop psychology and
Right.
but I can tell you from a high performance standpoint, there's only two ways to build confidence. Number one is to prepare. So if you're prepared, you're more likely to achieve whatever it
Right.
is that you want. So preparation. And number two is prove it. That's preparation, prove it, the two P's. Prove it. You got to prove things to yourself first, and then you have to prove things to the people around you. Otherwise, yeah, if I mean, winning is proving it, right? And preparation is really important. So I think there's only two ways: preparation and prove it.
That's good.
You coach a lot of people, a lot of business. My one last question is, sometimes there's a theme with everybody you coach. You notice that, like when I go out and coach leaders, there's a theme that seems to come up. I said, what do you want to get better at? What do you, and the same things come up all the time, maybe five of them. What mental habit should most athletes and CEOs unlearn?
Mm. Boy, that's such an excellent question. I would say it is overthinking. So we think that knowledge is power, and to some degree it can be, but too much knowledge actually paralyzes people. So think of it this way. Think of it in thoughts like or like calories. If you have too many calories and that you can't expend, what happens to your body? You get slow and
You get
lethargic. It
fat.
slows you down. Yeah, and you get fat. Well, in the same way, when athletes think too much and they're not instinctual enough,
Mm.
then their thoughts literally slow them down. And speed in sports and sometimes speed in business is crucial.
Hmm.
So I would say it's the in the day and age of analytics, and especially with AI sort of being on the horizon and already here, I think there's an overemphasis on analyzing things, and there's an underemphasis in having clear and succinct thoughts that put you in a position to succeed.
Thank you. Clarity is kindness. I've always heard that word.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate that. Our guest today has been Gary Chupik. Gary, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that? What's the best way?
Well, thanks for asking. There's two places I am mostly. Number one is Instagram because most of my athletes are there and business people. So Instagram at Elite Mindset. I'm the guy with the blue verification dot. And then LinkedIn, they can just type in my name, Gary Chupik, or Elite Mindset, and they'll find me there.
Elite Mindset. I'm writing that down. So yeah, I can type your name in there too, can I?
Of course.
Okay, great. Terry, how do they get in touch with you?
TerryLyles.com. Really easy. Just my
Yes.
name.com. I've had it forever and it's same kind of thing. So Gary, it's great to meet you. I'm gonna follow you, watch what you're doing, and love being able to share with you and you with us. So thank you for being a part of this today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
As we move forward, I would like to invite you back again and talk about some specifics as we both grow and we both get better at what we're doing and we meet different people, because I think the conversation will change, especially when AI starts entering the field. So if you're open to that conversation, I look forward to that.
I sure am.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Terry. I appreciate it. And if you like the show, please hit the stars. Please share it with somebody. And also, please let us know what you think about the show. This has been Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles.